Okay, we're going to start the Vision Committee meeting for March 21st. We're going to open this session with any questions or comments for the council.
Hey folks, in here we've got a project schedule that alleviates a lot of problems that we anticipate right now. Is there any way we could put that project schedule up as a first slide, please? To show where we are and what we're doing. The major concern we have here is that we made a promise to the citizens of Cañon City that any time something like this was going to be done, that we would seek input from them. And it's in there, I understand that, but I'd like to know that the people out there understand it. Okay, where there's going to be one-on-one meetings in public and this and that. You look like I'm not being...
Well, I guess I'm confused. Do we have the presentation backwards today?
No,
I mean,
no.
we're prepared to
Okay, do what you want.
discuss
I'm just
exactly
making a
what you're.
suggestion.
I mean, it kind of seems strange that we're starting out with questions.
No, not questions, just an overview of the schedule of where we are, so that people don't have the...
That's what I'm here for.
I'll be quiet.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
My suggestion, I'll be quiet.
No, that's fine. It's a good suggestion, and I'm prepared to do that.
John? That's it. Sally? Frank? Okay.
Sorry, but that way it just kind of clears, I think it's going to clear a lot of questions during the presentation.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion.
So with none other comments from council, Adam, I think the floor is yours.
Okay.
Or the mic,
All
whichever.
right. So thank you very much for that, Councilman Gill. So yes.
Yeah, right.
Right away, I want to make some statements and make some clarifications and so that we can get started into the presentation. So first, I want to start with introductions. However, Michelle Hansen to my left here is with Stolfus and Associates. She is our consultant who is working on the access control plan. And to my right is Valerie Sword, who is CDOT's access control manager, or she has a new title now, right? Permits manager out of the Region 2 office in Pueblo. So first things first, this plan is not CDOT's plan. I want to make that very clear. This is the city's plan. This is not a CDOT project. This is a city project. With that being said, it is being paid for in the majority by CDOT. We are contributing some dollars, but thankfully we have CDOT on board as a partner, significantly as a funding partner, but also as a partner in developing the plan itself. I want to make that very clear. So this is not something that CDOT's bringing to us and trying to shove down our throats. The reason we are here today is to discuss the access control plan for East Canyon. This started back when we completed our US 50 corridor plan a few years ago. And one of the things that was identified in that plan, and this plan was adopted by City Council and by CDOT, was to take a look at the East Canyon portion of the corridor as far as how it interacts with the Fremont Drive, the frontage roads, and how that affects safety, how it affects the effectiveness of the signals, and how it affects business access. And out of that plan, the decision was made that the best thing to do for all of those would be to eliminate the frontage road. And so CDOT started talking to the city about devolving that right-of-way and roadway to the city, and then the city would then eliminate it and create new accesses and improve exactly what I said, improve safety, improve operation of the signals, and improve business access. Because when the improvements were made back in the 90s to the frontage road, a lot of those accesses were either cut off or very limited. And so we recognize the importance of being able to access those businesses better and more safely. So that's why we're here today. So that's what it is. What it is not is the taking of anybody's property. That won't happen. It's not allowed with the CDOT access code. We're going to follow the CDOT access code. We're going to make sure everybody still has access when it's all said and done. And that's an assurance as we go forward. That's the point of this plan. The other thing I want to make sure everybody knows is that as a requirement in developing this plan, each and every property owner will be met with individually. Unless they refuse to meet with us or we cannot reach them for some reason, we will be having one-on-one meetings with each and every property owner as we move forward. Whether the property owner agrees to or chooses to bring his tenant or his or her tenant with them to those meetings is entirely up to them. The requirement is to meet with the property owner because that's who owns that access. The next steps after today,
Are you going to keep notes on those? I know that's a stupid question, but,
absolutely.
okay.
Yep.
I mean, in terms of.
Yeah,
who
so
you-
what happens from those meetings is we flush out and negotiate what we need to happen
Okay.
for the access plan to work. So we've put together a preliminary staff and consultant and CDOT level plan of what we see needs to happen. That's kind of where we're at today. The next step will be a public open house. That's planned for April 26th, sorry. It's a Thursday, April 26th, from 5 to 7 PM in this same room. There'll be a public open house. That's for anybody from the public that can come and give their comments, because this isn't just about the property owners, it's also about the general public. Then, as we develop the plan, we'll come back to this board for you to review it again. And at the very end, the city will adopt the plan and sign an IGA with CDOT to enforce and build the plan into the future. That's the process. Did that help, Mark?
That helped tremendously.
Okay.
I just, the thing I fear is that, I mean, there's been so many plans that have been put in order or put into effect, and the business owners, the citizens and stuff didn't really have a chance on the input. So basically what we're saying is this is a proposal you're gonna get with each and every person and basically say, hey, this is it. How can we tune this, within reason, of course,
Yep.
to make it agreeable to all.
Yes. And
Okay.
it's a product of a plan that's already been vetted and adopted, and it's something that the community previously had all agreed that it was the best plan.
I agree.
What was that date you said?
April 26th.
Doesn't this say that 19th?
Yeah. No, 26th is a
So
Thursday.
the version that you had was,
Oh,
was originally identified as April 19th, and CDOT is unable to make that meeting, and we want to make sure that we have CDOT available, so it is
If they're
now
giving the
April
money, we need to
26th.
make sure they're here.
Do
Personal opinion.
do we have a time? Is that going to be a?
5 to 7 PM.
Here.
And then there'll be a second open house later on in the year. This process, because of all those one-on-one meetings, and negotiations back and forth and development of the plan, it will take us through the good part of this year to complete.
I don't know how many people were here that participated in the River Corridor Plan, but I thought that that was an interesting process in terms of, they basically recreated the entire River Corridor Plan in a large map, and then allowed people to put little stickers and notes and stuff on that whole thing. And I thought that process by a different organization was a pretty good process.
Our process will be very similar. We're actually going to add something to that as well. People will be allowed to leave written comments that night or send them in at a later date. They can do it anonymously, or they can, if they're not comfortable talking in front of other people and that sort of thing, we'll have that availability.
I think one of the problems that we ran into was some people felt like that they come to that meeting. I remember some people, and I don't know that we could get the information straight, where they were thinking that they could come to that meeting and provide comments, and then tried to make comments and were told that they couldn't, and I don't know that we ever got all that information straight in terms of what. Do you remember something like that, Dina? Weren't you here? Wasn't that when you first started? Well, we're somewhat off subject, but we're not. Do you recall something about somebody making a complaint that they came to the meeting?
I think
To-
I know what you're talking about. That
Yeah,
was
I don't
the-
recall that.
That was the US 50 crossing, and that's because they tried to show
Mm.
up at a working committee meeting rather than an open house.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that. You were absolutely
Okay.
correct. There was a committee meeting involved.
You're off the
and-
hook.
Yeah, and it wasn't a member that was in there.
Okay.
And these meetings will be an open house format where people can come, when it best works for them, when they get off work, whatever. We'll have staff available that can walk through the boards and the plots that we have and answer any questions that they may have individually. It won't be a presentation or anything like that, but we found that for this type of project, where people are usually interested in some pretty key locations, that works a little better for folks to be able to discuss their specific issues with the staff available at the meeting, so.
It worked for the other one, I thought.
Jim?
John?
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, I've got, actually, I have an ask. What I would like to ask you to do is in these one-on-one meetings with the property owners, and hopefully the tenants, hopefully both parties will be represented there, is to actually make a list of their concerns that at some point you can present to council and say, here was the concern and here was the resolution. I realize there are going to be some concerns that are not going to be resolvable. That's fine. But so I would like to ask that you bring, at some point,
That's a
we
good
get to
point.
see such a list.
Dolly?
I'm sorry, my question was, on the Arkansas River project, on that open house, the map was laid out on the table, and so this will be presented similar to that,
Well,
is that what you're saying?
I just know that when we did that one at the first stage, in terms of a process for receiving public input, they had recreated, I don't know how many maps they had, what, 6 or 8? That recreated the whole river corridor, and then people could actually look at it. And then they had a process where they had little dots and stuff that you put on there and wrote comments on the thing.
Oh.
So it was a
okay.
process that was visual, but then also gave everybody an opportunity to, you know, if you didn't like the crossing at a particular area, you could write a note, a sticky note, and put it on there that needed to be addressed, so.
Sure, because that person is more
Some-
familiar with
Something
that.
similar to that.
Yeah,
It
that's
worked
exactly
really
what we
well.
do.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll
perfect.
have boards. We can also bring and lay out plots on tables that will have all the same information, and it will be the information that you have in your packets, but not in individual sheets. It'll be big, long rolls of the whole corridor. And that's exactly what we do, is sticky notes, and folks can
Yeah.
write their comment and stick it on there, or they can take a comment sheet and write their comments on the comment sheet. We try to give people lots of opportunities to comment.
Thank you.
Okay. Proceed?
Yep, so go ahead, Michelle.
Adam, you answered my question, you can start at the beginning now.
We'll go back a little bit here. So just kind of overview of what we're going to talk about today, purpose of the project. Adam kind of already got into that. We're going to talk a little bit about what is access management and why is it important, both to the city and to CDOT. And then we'll kind of walk through the draft access plan. I will probably just highlight some major points, but if you guys have specific locations that you want to get into, feel free to jump in and ask questions, and we can talk about those specifically. And ultimately, we just want to make sure you guys are feeling like you know what's going on with the project, and that you feel like it's going in the right direction, and we're ready to go to the public and talk with them. So if we have gone in a different direction than you were anticipating, let us know, but we feel like we're in a pretty good spot to go present at least our first draft ideas to the public and start to get their feedback, so we can really hone in on a good plan. So as Adam said, this really started with your US 50 corridor plan. Ultimately, through the East Canyon section, we're looking to eliminate the frontage road, which right now is over here in this area to the right of the screen, and really create kind of an urban parkway section on US 50. So you'll have the 3 lanes in each direction, along with kind of this raised median. Probably has potential for some landscaping and that kind of thing, as well as multimodal bike pedestrian facilities on both the north and south side of the highway. And what this does for you is it creates the ability to give some of this space back that the frontage road is using back for economic development and the development of these properties as time goes on. As well as, creates better access and better operations along Highway 50. But one of the things that is happening here is that all these accesses that are coming onto the frontage road, we need to figure out how those properties are gonna access now directly to the highway or to the local street system, and do it in a way that is safe and continues to maintain the operations on the highway at a level that's acceptable.
Ma'am, and maybe Tony, maybe Adam too. They're essentially abandoning that right of way, is that correct?
So yes, so what this access control plan will do for you is it creates a plan that both the city and CDOT will buy into, which will allow for the devolution of that frontage road. CDOT will give up ownership of the frontage road to the city. And then from that point on, you as the city can determine how that right-of-way will be used, whether it's given back to property owners or used for some of these multimodal considerations, that kind of thing.
Isn't there a priority statewide in terms of that abandonment, that there's a procedure that has to be followed in terms of who has first right of refusal? It's the city first? Thank you.
So this is just a little blow up. On the right side, this is Reynolds. You can see this kind of hatched area in the middle is the raised median. Then the public roads you can see are starting to connect into US 50, where before they were just connecting into Fremont. You can also see that, so the trail is right here, this area right in here. You can see there's quite a bit of area that does become available that was not previous, that was used for roadway right of way, and now would be available for other uses. So this kind of starts to give you an idea of what it would begin to look like once you get rid of the frontage road, and how those access points will then connect into the highway.
That's a question. Go ahead, Mark.
On this, it looks like Fremont Drive is gonna end up being like non-existent. Can this be used for like off-street parking for, you know, like parallel parking or whatever, you know, for our visitors that come in can get off one of the arterials and go park or something off of a highway?
I think that it has potential to be used for a lot of different things. If you were to do something like that, I think with this plan, in terms of accessing that space, it would likely be done from the local street system to get into there. But I think there's a lot of opportunities to do different things with that space. And once CDOT gives over that use, I think that's up to the city to determine what that looks like.
I have a question. Looking at this, if you're headed eastbound and you want to turn on Diamond, are those medians going to be broken off for intersections, or?
So there will be certain locations where they will be, and there will be certain locations where they will not be. There will be certain locations where those will just be right in,
How
right
is
out.
that
But
better?
remember, today, for most of these roads, you do not have access,
Right.
direct access
Right.
at all
Right.
from Highway 50 to the local streets. So let me keep going, and then
Okay,
we'll get
I
into the
kinda
plan, and you'll
wondered if
start
you
to
would
kind of
answer that.
see, we can kind of discuss how that works and where you'll have the ability to turn left and where you won't.
Okay,
But fundamentally, look, East Main will still functionally exist. Is that for the most part or not?
East Main remains the
Yes.
same.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about access management here. Really, it helps us kind of connect the two pieces of transportation and land use together. And what we see is usually you kind of create these improvements that you have greater accessibility and increased land values, development is occurring, traffic volumes start to increase, and land uses changes, which creates that additional traffic. And that's where you start to create more conflicts between vehicles, and you also create more congestion on the highway, which deteriorates your level of service, and then you're kind of back at the top here going, we need to make improvements. So what happens with access management is you come in on this side over here and you reduce this, this conflict, the amount of conflict that you have through access management, which then in turn helps both your safety and your operations on the highway and makes you be able to stretch out the life of your system a little bit further. So if we can make some good decisions about where access is located, we can really kind of extend the life of our system. So one of the major benefits, I would argue maybe the best benefit of access management is safety. The majority of crashes that occur on the highway at intersections are related to left turn movements, as you can see in the graphic there. So if we can identify key locations where people are making those movements and not allowing them all throughout the entire corridor, we can start to minimize the amount of conflicts that are occurring, which will then see a reduction in the amount of crashes that we're having. Studies have shown reduction of up to 30 to 60% of crashes on highways that implement access management techniques. So that becomes huge. In terms of operations, the less people are coming on and off the highway at locations that might be unpredictable or just the sheer number of locations, the more the traffic slows down, your operations start to deteriorate. So we can actually increase the capacity on the highway as traffic volumes begin to increase by 20 to 40%. And that gives us all sorts of benefits, including, you know, less emissions and better air quality and that kind of thing, as well as, you know, just less delay on the highway. So this is the piece that sometimes people kind of get stuck on is, you know, if you have consolidated my access, it's going to hurt my business. But the studies actually show that that is not the case at all. What access management can do is actually retain your original market area. So, you know, right now you have this area where if people are willing to drive 10 minutes to get their hair done, you have this market area that covers a certain amount of the city. As traffic volumes increase and we start to see more delay, it starts to just make your market area get smaller and smaller because you're not willing to drive 20 minutes to get your hair done anymore. You actually will just find another place to go.
You gals do that.
And maybe it's just to go to the grocery store. Maybe getting the hair done isn't a good example there, but but so if we can retain that original market area, it's huge for businesses. In addition, if people don't feel safe making the turns to get to your business, they're going to find another place to go. And so if we can find ways to make it safe or give people alternatives that are safer, we can retain those business customers as well. So we will also see, I think, especially with your parkway concept that you guys have developed, that the aesthetics of a corridor that have access management becomes so much better. You don't have these big, wide open driveways. You have the ability to do some landscaping. You have a very kind of consistent development of driveway locations, and your whole corridor starts to become more attractive in terms of business. So a lot of benefits really for businesses by the application of these techniques. So some of the techniques that we are talking about, one is to consolidate access points. This really is, you've got 2 or 3 driveways to your property, and we would like to reduce that and identify one key driveway to your business that is designed in a way that you know, accommodates the vehicles properly, but reduces the number of points in which people are entering and exiting. And some of that can also be done in terms of adjacent properties, shared access points between 2 properties where perhaps sharing a parking lot, and then just having one access point that serves both of them. We'll get into that a little bit in this plan as well. And finally, just this idea of defining the driveway, having these big wide cuts where you just have no idea where people are coming in and out. Defining that so it's very clear to both the drivers on the highway as well as the drivers entering and exiting the business. Where should you be entering and exiting? Adam talked a little bit about where should signals be located, and having a adequate spacing between traffic signals is key to making the operations on the highway and how long people are waiting to get through those signals. So we are looking at where those should be spaced. We're also looking at trying to make the availability of turn lanes at those major access points so that those folks can get out of the through lanes and feel safe to make their left turns.
Are you factoring in how people drive in Canyon?
I've been depending on Adam for that here.
Can I just ask a
Huge safety
question?
factor.
And they take their 40-foot horse trailer through the McDonald's drive-through?
Yes.
Dolly?
My question is, okay, so when we go back to 2 more slides, and we're talking about consolidating access points. Right now, we have the ability to go east or west on the frontage road. This will take that away.
Yep.
So, will
So
we
what
have
kind of
to
techniques would you
reconstruct-
have?
I'm sorry?
So is your question, what kind of techniques do we have to address?
Yes.
That-
So let's say like Jimmy John's, I don't know
Oh.
if you're familiar with the whole
Yep.
area, but Jimmy John's has one entrance in and out. It's right in the middle of the block. How do we get in there?
The, Councilwoman Gonzalez, maybe we can wait till, on that question. I have that same question,
Okay,
and I am
all right.
looking for an answer till we get to that slide.
Okay.
When we get to those slides, I think it'll help to have
Okay.
those particular areas
Yeah.
up.
Let me offer you just a bit of advice. If you go on 85 in Colorado Springs, which
Mhm.
goes through Fountain,
Mhm.
there's a number of places where you pull into those shopping areas, and you're on a little side street, basically. That's actually inside the shopping place.
You're right.
That gets you around, and we're in Colorado Springs, and we're very accustomed to that, realizing that's the only way I get there, and that's the only way I get back. But
Sure.
they've got those little side streets that are inside the shopping centers. That may help you.
Like inside of City Market. Parking lot.
Well, but they're much more defined in Colorado
Sure.
Springs.
Okay. all right.
Continue, please.
All right, so the right in, right out is kind of where your question comes from there. This technique, limiting the left turn movement so that we can provide the safe locations to make those left turns, but still providing access in between those locations. This right in, right out gives us that option. And so it's just what it sounds like. You can turn right into the access and you can turn right out of it. No left turn lanes, no left turns or through movements. And typically applied with the median, which is consistent with the corridor plan. The other one, which is called a directional, let's see if I can get this on, the directional median opening, more commonly called a three-quarter movement in our business, allows for a left turn lane in and the two right turn movements, but no left turn out of the access point. And this also creates some opportunities where we can develop some U-turn movements, which are actually much safer than you'd think, because you're only dealing with one direction of traffic. So if I'm making a U-turn here at this location, if I can get my pointer to point, I only have to look at eastbound traffic to decide to make my movement, rather than if I was trying to make a left out, I would have to look both for westbound and eastbound traffic. So, big safety benefits there. And the last one has to do with really taking advantage of the local street system, providing access to the local street system, and then the local street system actually accesses the highway itself. And so when you're accessing off the local streets, you're dealing with typically lower volumes of vehicles, and you can make those movements much easier. So where does all this come from? The State Highway Access Code is what designates access to the highway today. It is state law. CDOT is required to follow it on all of their state highways. And it defines the locations and levels of access to the highway, as well as the design criteria for how you would design those. And it's, it's very specific. It's based, each highway is classified as a certain type of highway, and the amount of access that's allowed is based on that classification. And, as I said, CDOT, without an access control plan, has to follow that code. It is really CDOT's only opportunity where they can start to have developers mitigate their impacts to the highway system. They really have no other mechanism to do that. So that is another element of the code. The code does allow for these access control plans, which basically then will replace the criteria for location and level of access, meaning what turning movements can you make at that location. And so if both parties agree to this access control plan, enter into an intergovernmental agreement, it completely replaces the code by law in terms of location and level of access. So you've basically developed this vision together, the Canyon City and CDOT, and you've agreed that this is how you will implement access to the highway as development occurs, or as projects come into play.
So I have a question on that. So it says when adopted, it replaces the criteria. So the adoption, is that codified in the intergovernmental agreement? Is that where that is? That's where it's adopted, formally
Yes.
adopted? And the intergovernmental agreement, of course, the CDOT side of it, I think, is pretty straightforward, but the city side of it, is that an action by the council? Is that,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
We would have to approve the IGA. Or we would approve Tony to sign the IGA, right,
Or the mayor, either party.
Signed by the mayor, yeah.
Mayor? One of those two big wigs.
He gets more.
Thank you. You can move it around, yeah.
It's also a really good planning tool so that the city and the state, when they're approached by a developer, we're telling them the same thing because we're looking at the same document and being able to tell them. So there's no surprises. We know what's going to come, and they know what's going to come. So it's really good. It benefits everybody.
What's the process for amending it? I mean, just simplistically.
So, I mean, simplistically, you both have to agree to it. That's the most simple thing. But basically, there will be an amendment process as part of the IGA.
Just an
Um,
addendum.
Amendments typically have to be brought forward by the local agency. So a property owner would need to work through
Right.
you and your staff to actually propose an amendment. So if you felt like that was valid, you would then bring it to CDOT, you would review it together and see
Okay.
if you believe it's justified. And then if so, if you both agree to it, then an amendment to
Thank
the
you.
IGA would be required. All right. So we talked about the amendments. This access control plan is required to get to that devolution piece, to actually implement the East Canyon. So, you know, that really is exactly why we're here today. But I wanted to make sure that you guys understood that there's lots of other benefits besides, well, this is required to get to our next step in our plan. This is actually the city's opportunity to partner with CDOT and develop a vision for the whole corridor. CDOT, when they're looking, and I think you guys are actually the issuing authority, so also when Adam's looking at it today, it's by a case-by-case basis. First come, first serve. Whichever property gets there first, you look at that property, you make the decision, you move on. You don't get the opportunity to consider the other land uses around, how the accesses interact with one another. And you, from CDOT's standpoint, they don't get to look at land use at all. All they can do is really look at the transportation side. So this is the opportunity to marry that transportation and land use together, and we know they're tied so tightly anyways, and really develop a vision for the whole corridor. And as Valerie said, it gives you a plan, so, and the developers a plan, and the property owners a plan, so they, as they're starting to think about what do I want to do with this property, they already know what the access should look like, and they can plan around that, rather than trying to have to go through this big negotiation process where we don't know what it looks like. So it's a pretty nice benefit from a development standpoint to already have that in place.
Just for council's information, without getting into the specifics, we recently had, maybe Adam did, somebody did, a situation where we had a development with access to US 50, and instead of two businesses potentially working together for a nice shared access to the highway, one business chose to put their application in immediately, knowing the rules, that in all probability the other business would be denied because of the DOT guidelines. So this would alleviate some of those things.
Exactly.
That would make a common entrance that would benefit not only the traffic on US 50, but the pedestrians, the drivers, and the businesses.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Yes, my question is, how wide is the corridor?
I believe the right-of-way, if we consider both the frontage road right-of-way and the highway right-of-way, is somewhere in the range of 175 feet.
Okay, so total width. So and this is a concern I have, because to me that's, the study may not have a wide enough corridor, because as we take traffic off Fremont Drive, it has to go somewhere. And the somewhere is likely to be north of Fremont Drive somewhere. And so I think that's a concern I have, that the corridor, that this plan, you know, this all sounds great. You know, this sounds like we're headed in a really good, you know, direction here. But I think that part of this planning process has to consider the diversion of traffic off Fremont Drive on to somewhere.
And for, you know, we are looking at traffic operations. I don't have a lot of detail that I've incorporated into this presentation here, but I certainly can provide you some more specific details. We are looking at the operations here. We aren't looking specifically at every local street and how exactly that's all going to work, but we have considered, if you can't make a left turn here, what does that mean, and how will that traffic divert? You know, a lot of that depends on some engineering judgment. We don't know for sure how traffic will move once certain areas or certain turn movements are cut off. But I think that the majority of traffic will still remain on US 50. But you're right. I'm not going to tell you that there isn't going to be, and part of this plan is to utilize the local street system. So there is going to be some increase in traffic. However, I don't think it's going to be so noticeable that the residents feel like it's now a speedway or anything like that.
Well, I would think if they improve the traffic flow on Highway 50, it's going to help the side streets, not hinder them. Because now people know they can go up through Highway 50 a lot smoother, a lot quicker. And then those folks that live in those areas should actually have the accommodations to travel within their living zone a lot smoother. I don't think it'll do what the other project did that pushes everything onto East Main Street. If the system runs smooth through the highway, hey, and I want to go somewhere, that's where I'm gonna go. If I want to go visit my neighbor on Cherry, now I can go visit my neighbor. That won't change that. I don't think we're gonna throw people off the highway onto a side street.
We're gonna throw people off of Fremont Drive.
I know, I
Onto
know.
somewhere.
Well,
Right.
but you're
Onto
not really,
somewhere.
in a sense, throwing them completely off Fremont Drive if the design pattern is designed properly.
Mr. Hammer?
Yes.
So and we can provide it, we have some data that we actually gathered, Dina's team, when they did the corridor plan, they actually did some capacity analysis. And I don't remember the numbers, but there was adequate capacity there. And in fact, there's plenty of capacity. The issue has never been along that corridor capacity, it's been operations. It's a delay at the signals. And so what we found actually doing the corridor plan is there are people that avoid the highway and are using places like East Main and so forth because they're avoiding the signals. So we do have some of that information, but.
Because the signals are so long.
Right.
Because you've got how many lanes of traffic that are side road, and you gotta sit there and it's like, okay, I live right off of a frontage road, you know, within a half a mile of a frontage road. If I could go down that frontage road, or go down my street, be on a frontage road for a block, and get onto Highway 50, I would do it. But right now, we're trapped on Fremont Drive. And it's either, okay, I either make a left to go down to a signal, or I go right to go to a signal, and either one of them is probably a 940-minute signal when you're sitting there in a hurry.
Dina?
So, yeah, just to provide some of that information, so when the US 50 corridor plan was done, adopted in 2015, as Adam mentioned, the 20-year projected volumes that came from CDOT for that project, basically in this area, the East Canyon area, is still showing anywhere from a 30 to 50% capacity on US 50 in the year 2035.
So what does that mean? And that it would be
So-
at 30 to 50%?
So there would
Of
still
capacity.
be anywhere from 30 to 50% capacity remaining on US 50 in 2035.
There'll be 50 to 70% less traffic than the road is able to handle. Am I correct?
Sure, I mean, the congestion that you feel today is at the stoplight.
Correct.
No,
And
it's
you're
a
sitting
half a
there
mile.
waiting 900.
That's 'cause
It's a
you're
half a
waiting
mile
next to
up the road
everybody.
from the
Right.
stoplight.
And if I could, one of the great benefits of this plan is at our stoplights, we get rid of one whole set of people that have to access,
two,
that have their
isn't it?
own,
Isn't
their
it two?
own.
Yeah.
Is it one or two?
Yeah.
But there's a reduction in the number of people that have to stop and wait for the stoplight. Number of directions, I guess.
And I think there's also a reduction in just confusion in how that works. It's, you know, the frontage road is so close to Highway 50 that, you know, how am I supposed to get on there and how does that work? I think especially for visitors to the area, it can be quite confusing and, or maybe just, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to avoid it.
One of the questions I would have is, for maybe related to Dina, when the traffic study was done, what time of year was it done at? Because there's a very significant difference on Highway 50 in July than there is today. And I don't mean that facetiously, I just mean that because, you know, we are a major arterial pathway, you know, through
Right.
tourist areas, it is not uncommon for traffic to be backed up pretty significantly in June, July, August on those.
That's when CDOT does their counts.
That's an issue
Okay,
that we
okay,
typically
and that's
kind of
what,
take
that
into
was
account.
my question is, what time of year are they doing them?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's what we kind of take it into account, and even if the traffic counts that you have available are done in March, we typically look at what's happening with traffic all throughout the entire year, and look at where is the kind of that peak time, and really look for what we call the 85th percentile time.
Okay.
And try to then make adjustments to the traffic volumes that are more consistent with that 85th percentile, which is really more where we want to design for.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have that information, or Adam has that information in terms of the appendices from the US 50 corridor plan. I don't recall offhand, but
Okay.
yeah.
Can I ask a
Ally?
question? This plan does include sidewalks and walkways for pedestrians and bicyclists?
So your
On both
corridor
sides?
plan includes pedestrian and bicycle facilities on both the south and the north side. The access control plan really is only identifying where accesses will be located and what level of access they'll have. And we're trying to think about how that interacts with the pedestrian facilities. And, you know, from that standpoint, the fewer accesses you have, the better for your pedestrians and bicyclists as well. Because you've just reduced the amount of conflicts they're gonna have to deal with as well. So we're trying to take that into account as we're evaluating where access should be located.
And how about crosswalks across the highway?
So the crosswalks will generally occur at your traffic
Okay.
signals.
All right.
So we wanna make, you know, it's a lot of traffic, it's moving at a pretty high speed. We wanna make those crossings very safe. So those will generally be at your signals.
That's another subject.
Oh, that's a whole nother subject.
Yeah, you can make it really safe. You know, like when you go into one of the federal properties where they got this little ramp that comes up, you know, so you can't get in. Put that up when the crosswalk's up. It'll stop all the traffic.
I haven't seen that one before.
Okay, go ahead.
So the implementation of the access control plan, understanding this is typically pretty key, especially for your property owners. You know, you guys have this corridor plan that you'll be pursuing, and so a lot of the access control plan would be implemented with a project that the city would pursue. But we have some other triggers that would happen, and you know, there's gonna be some time prior to implementation where the access control plan, once you've adopted it, will still be looking to implement it. So certainly if you had a smaller, different publicly funded project by either the city or CDOT, there's portions of the access control plan you could implement. The other key one is if somebody redevelops. And that redevelopment is gonna be defined by CDOT's access code definition, which is if you've redeveloped and the traffic that is entering and exiting your site increases by 20% or more from what it's doing today, then that's considered a change in use. And that's when you need to get an access permit, which you will still, the property owners will still need to do. And that is when we would look to implement the access control plan at that particular property. So these pieces can kind of be phased as necessary.
Right, and also I want to know, since we are an issuing authority for our jurisdiction, we can add to those things as long as they're more stringent than the access code. We can't say less than 20% or more than 20%, but we can say any redevelopment, or we can, just as we have today, we have other standards that are above and beyond what CDOTs are. But we'll want to make sure those are in the access control plan and in the IGA, so that again, we're all on the same page.
So the last trigger is if there's a safety or operational issue that develops. You know, if we start to see a crash problem that an access management technique that's consistent with the plan would solve, perhaps it's taking somebody to a right in, right out, then CDOT and the city would work together to try to solve that safety issue.
Frank, did you have a question?
I can wait until she's completely done. Are you,
Keep going?
yes.
All right. So we'll start to get in the project a little bit here. We're beginning at 15th Street and going to about the Abbey. That's the section that we've looked at. At the very beginning of this process, we sat down with staff from the city and CDOT and developed some project goals. Really, the point of that is that once we develop the plan, we want to look back at these goals. We've developed criteria to say, are we meeting these goals? And we'll run our plan through this matrix to determine, did we really do what we set out to do? So we're looking to get efficient travel on US 50. We're also looking to get safe and effective access to businesses, residents, and guests in Canyon City. We want to maintain compatibility with your local street system, and if there's any connections that seem to make sense that would help that circulation work, we've identified those in the plan. We want to make sure that it's adoptable by both entities, and that it can be implemented in phases, that you're not tied to just doing this whole thing all at once necessarily. We want to support the economic viability of the project area and maintain compatibility with your previous planning efforts, which generally is your corridor plan. And then we certainly want to support multimodal transportation in the corridor. So this sheet, council members, you may want to take and set aside to help you kind of follow along and look through. And we'll go ahead and start to get into the plan itself. I don't know if you want to ask your question before we do that, or keep going.
Kelly, bring up the access management principles and techniques.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure I understood what you said. And we're looking at the photo to the right, where you're allowing a left turn from one location to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thought when you said that it would allow the traffic to go ahead and make a U-turn going the opposite way. Was that what, the statement?
Yes.
Okay, to me, now, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that, but the key thing for me, in my opinion, for that to work is the traffic signal away from that, allowing enough of a break so that people can make that safe turn. And that would be the only, in a sense, danger that we could have. Because I know there's a lot of U-turn areas on Highway 50 once you get into Pueblo. So the traffic signal before that area would be an important location where it's put.
Yes, absolutely. And so we'll find them. We have 2 key locations that we've identified for 3/4 movements in the corridor. And a lot of it has to do with creating a situation where we can have some U-turn availability between 2 signals. And they're spaced kind of very evenly between the signals. So we can kind of get into that. All right. Jumped the gun a little bit there. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. It's a little smarter than I am, obviously.
While you're working on that, I have a question. Okay, great. Oops.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, you said there's going to be 3 lanes in each direction? Is that correct?
So it's actually two through lanes in
With
each
a-
direction with a right turn
Yes.
ACEL decel lane.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Okay.
All right. So we'll start down here in the 15th Street area. And, 15th, basically you're going to see that the traffic signals that you have today are going to stay in their existing location, and that the spacing that you have today is very consistent with what we would be looking for on this type of highway. So that kind of backbone is already set up for us pretty nicely. We do identify, let me zoom out just a little bit, that we'd like to have what we're gonna, a right turn movement off the highway going westbound here over by Main Street and North 16th. And that outlet provides a few different things. It takes a little pressure off of 15th Street, number 1, which is a pretty constrained area today anyways, and you've got, buildings right up to the highway. It also creates the ability to access the local businesses in the area around the city market and Walgreens, and creates kind of that movement that might be more natural for people as they I just saw the city market, I want to get off, and without going through 15th Street and the roundabout and that kind of thing. And then one of the key things is it creates this connection to your downtown core, and provides that access directly into the downtown core, rather than creating these different turning movements that you have to make when you go through 15th Street.
I don't see that. How are you gonna get from that right off?
So you're gonna come through here along Main Street and go straight into town, go straight into the downtown.
But you're coming off at the 16th Street intersection, are you not?
So one of the things here is that the configuration of this area will probably need to look different. And we have not specifically defined exactly how that should look. We have looked at several alternatives, and some of them consider changing up how the circulation in that area works. And one of the things that will be important for the highway operations is this movement of the right turn off of 50 into town. We'd like that to be a free flow movement where you're not stopping here at 16th and Main. You're allowing the vehicles to continue through without stopping. So that does bring up, there are a few options we've looked at, but creates either some different circulation required or maybe some movements that aren't stopping today that will need to stop in the future. So as you continue in your planning of what does this corridor look like, you'll be able to take those alternatives further along and identify a preferred alternative. But in terms of the access control plan, we're saying it makes sense for us to allow vehicles to exit Highway 50 at this location so that you can access downtown and the local businesses.
So to clarify, this plan effort is not final design. So as long as
Right.
everybody understands that,
Right,
that's
yeah.
still to come. Okay, yeah.
That's gonna be a challenging
Yes.
You gotta
task.
build a foundation before you can ever build the house.
Right.
But the foundation is done off of a plan and a thought of what the rest of the house is gonna look like.
Right.
Gotcha.
I mean, does it make sense to ask questions as we go along?
I think it does. Yeah, I think
Um,
let's,
I'm confused about the next red star, or whatever it is, which appears to be between the I think it's a Chinese red,
yep.
and Walgreens. That East Main portion there, I think that's East Main, or is it, yeah, Fremont. That's Fremont?
Fremont. Mhm.
That section of road there, is that or is that not accessible at that point?
Today,
No, in this
in
new
this plan.
configuration.
Okay, so the red is what we're calling a conditional right-in, right-out. Ultimately, we would like to see that closed, and we would like to see those properties gain access from the north side of their properties. But what we've recognized is they don't have the opportunity to do that until either the city creates some kind of public throughway here, or they gain an easement from that property owner to make that happen. So in the interim, until one of those two things happens, we still have to provide these two properties with access. And so that will be done through a right-in, right-out directly to US 50. The plan is, though, as development occurs, that eventually you'll find a way to get that access closed, and they'll gain access from the north side. Which, we've looked at this also kind of from a topographic standpoint. Can you actually make that connection work? And it does appear that physically, that is probably not a problem at all. It's just a matter of legally getting things in place that allow them to gain access from that spot.
So I'll reiterate, there's no takings in this. So we can't, even though we see a better way, there has to be some purchase on somebody's part
Of
to
that
make that
parking-
happen
of
for
that
them, and we
parking lot.
can't make them do that. So we have to allow that conditional access.
We'd have to buy that access through that whole parking lot area.
Right, and then work with them when and if they redevelop. We have to get them to agree to that.
Good luck.
Well, I mean, this is a prime example of what you described and what we see in many other communities that works wonderful, is you have a huge shopping center here that could have some common elements that work, and everybody you would actually make a lot of their access better, and it would help flow better with their neighbors so that someone can go over here and get something to eat and then go over here and shop, and those sorts of things that you're used to seeing in other communities.
So, if I understand this correctly, basically the purple kind of dotted line that goes through what would be Craddock Plaza, City Market, and Big R's parking lot, would that become like a city street, or is that going to be like a privately maintained
A city
access?
street or an easement, an access easement that's granted to everybody.
Okay, and so like businesses both north and south of that would now have access, whereas like right now, you can't go to the businesses south of Craddock Plaza because there's that lip and,
Right,
and there's
right,
that, okay,
Right,
okay.
yep.
Who would fix the drainage problem?
That's a whole nother plan. That's next month's meeting.
Probably a bulldozer.
Actually, two questions there. So where that cement curb actually exists right now and prevents vehicles from turning into the smoke shop there.
Right.
Exactly. So if we implement this, who pays to take that curb out and make that drivable?
Yeah, again, that's all negotiated. That's all negotiated. So it depends on what the triggers are, when it happens, who wants it to happen. You know, if this was gonna be a redevelopment, they're gonna scrape and rebuild, then the city and CDOT has an opportunity, they have the high hand on negotiations. If this is something the city wants to make happen sooner than later, then they have the high hand and there has to be some give and take. So it depends on what the trigger is to make it happen.
So unpack that a little bit, it could be the business that pays for it. It would never be the city that pays for it,
It could
would
be. Because
Could be.
let's say we really don't want that conditional access. We just don't think it's a good idea. We don't like how it looks. We don't like how it smells, sounds, whatever. We could go in there and say, listen, we're gonna give you this if you let us make this
Okay.
happen. Yeah.
Okay, understand that. But the other question is a really important one, and that is the interaction with our stormwater problem areas. And so does this, is there any planning that we're doing there? Because we're talking about making major changes over on Fremont Drive where we do have stormwater facilities that go under there. And so where does that sit in this plan?
Yeah, so again, that's final design stuff. So
It'll be
once,
final
yeah,
design
so
stuff.
once this is going and we figure out the phasing and that sort of stuff, when can we fund and build a certain portion? And then that will all have to be looked at that time.
Like a
Sure.
2A prioritization.
Yep.
Okay, and I've got a specific question. So if you're, and my question is basically, I think that's Village Inn right there.
Mhm.
Okay, so, I'm prepared. I'm prepared.
Bring your own laser pointer.
So,
I moved you over a little bit
so,
so that it's fully on the screen.
so Village Inn is right here.
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm on Highway 50 headed east, how do I get to Village Inn?
So, your option is you could turn beforehand if you knew you were going there, right, and use public streets to get there. Or you could turn
The same,
left at
yeah.
Orchard,
You have to go down the light.
Same way you do now. You'd have to turn
Yep.
at the light.
turn left at
Well,
Orchard, get
no,
onto Franklin, and come down
That's,
19.
So it does increase the.
that's my point, and that's really the point of my question. It's not the way that I go now. I go on Fremont Drive. Okay, it's not the way I go now. And so what you're talking about is taking traffic here, dumping it down here to come back. Okay? And so that's my question. It's more a global question because there are traffic flow issues there. There's, the number of cars per hour that now use Fremont Drive are gonna have to go somewhere else if we implement this plan, or hopefully when we implement this plan. 'Cause I think it's a great plan. but-
Yeah, and that is absolutely true. From an access control plan standpoint, one of the things that we are trying to do is to allow the local traffic to use your local street system. The local traffic that wants to go to Village Inn, that wants to go to Jimmy John's, to use the local street system where they can to do that and make safe movements from the local street system and keep the traffic on US 50 on US 50. And, you know, I don't think you guys are here yet, but at some point, if we don't manage the access on Highway 50, and now the congestion on Highway 50 is so bad that people are frustrated beyond all belief, they're gonna start turning, you know, they're gonna start turning right off on 19th or Diamond and go, oh, I think, you know, maybe Google Maps is telling me I can save 5 minutes if I drive through this person's neighborhood to get to wherever I'm going, rather than let's make Highway 50 work and keep that through traffic on Highway 50.
I think another way to say that is that the benefit that we get by increasing traffic on some of our city streets is that we get rid of some of the nightmares that the traffic lights right now that Fremont Drive cause. That's really one of the, in my view, one of the major benefits that we're looking at here is right now those traffic lights have to handle Fremont Drive. If that's eliminated, there's one less or two less cycles that the light has to go through. It's gonna speed up that.
641 minutes out of 900.
Yeah, well, I'll take it. Yeah.
But then they become
And-
more, but then those lights become more in sync with what's happening further down.
It'll
Highway
just flow the
50.
whole thing
So
better
it will
Yeah.
flow.
without the extra cycles
Theoretically.
and lights.
Theoretically, yes, absolutely. But I do have to agree with you. That was my point was, are we gonna be pushing some of this traffic into our neighborhoods?
And
Some of
is
the
it-
local
and-
traffic will
people-
use your local street system,
Is there gonna
yes.
be
Well-
cost of, you know, having to put in, speed reducing, like speed bumps or dips or things like that to reduce the speed? I mean, I would like to say that everybody's gonna be respecting their residential neighborhood when they're going to Village Inn, but the fact of the matter is the post-church traffic, you know, the huge influx that they get between 9 and 11 on Sundays, you know, is there gonna be an adverse effect, and is there gonna be some sort of remedy that the city's gonna have to do to kind of alleviate that for the homeowners there?
And, you know, I can go back and take a look and see what kind of traffic do we see diverting onto the local streets and try to give you a sense of what the magnitude is. I think it's not as much as you guys are imagining it to be. But we can give you a better sense of that and maybe put some numbers
Yeah,
to it to better understand that. I think from a, you know, traffic calming standpoint, that's certainly gonna be in the city's purview. And, you know, I think you wanna be a little bit careful with it and probably monitor how things are going and see if there's certain areas that become problems before you go and put speed bumps in. You know, speed bumps, the people that live there are gonna have to travel those speed bumps every day, and so if
And
just
I
a little
just
bit
use
of
those
extra traffic
metaphorically.
may not be enough for them to want to have to go over a speed bump every day, and how that's gonna affect their vehicles and those kinds of things, so.
And I use the speed bumps metaphorically, but essentially, you know, like Central Avenue is a major arterial pathway in Canyon City. It's a 30-mile-per-hour zone, you know, not too far off from our own residential 25s. But high-volume businesses that are getting traffic, like Franklin feeding Village Inn and Subway, are going to essentially part of the time almost turn into like Central Avenue-style traffic.
Is that street wide enough to handle that capacity? That's a narrow street, isn't it? With the
Franklin?
parking?
You know, I don't really
I
think
don't,
there's
I don't
gonna be
think the
that much
traffic
traffic.
is as much as you guys are imagining it to be.
Well, I
So
was
that's where
trying
I'd like to
say,
kind of go
yeah.
back and bring
We're
you some more
over-imagining.
information, and maybe I can get that back
Well,
through Adam.
In retrospect, when you look at downtown, if people are trying to find a parking space, they're traveling into the neighborhood to circle around or circle back around.
And those streets are much
Okay.
smaller
They're
than the streets
smaller.
out in that area.
So,
All I'm saying is, you need to go to 19th and Fremont Drive and try to make a left-hand turn
oh,
at about 5:30. It's impossible.
it doesn't happen.
I mean, there's a ton of traffic coming eastward on Fremont Drive right there at that intersection.
It's
And the
gorgeous.
reason is they're getting off at the light to access those shopping centers. So those people they'll be passing through and grabbing that access that we're showing in front of City Market.
You eliminate the lights, you eliminate that.
Hopefully. No, they won't. Oh,
Yeah.
that three-quarter turn?
Yeah.
Okay,
You can see it, that blue triangle.
This blue triangle.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But in order to turn left,
So this allows a left in,
but not a
So-
left
but
So-
not a left out.
So today, so I live on 19th Street today, Jim, and I know exactly what you're talking about, that left turn at Village Inn. So with this change, so to now I sit there and wait for my left turn. Now I will go to Orchard, I'll grab a left turn signal, which will be safe, and I'll turn on Orchard. I'll either make a U-turn back to 19th, or I'll turn on Orchard and head north to my house. I've driven another 300 feet, and I'm safer, and I've went a lot faster.
yeah.
My final question with this, I know it's a long-term plan, nothing quick. Where do we intend to focus the starting point? Okay, there's no way we're gonna be able to do it all the way through the corridor, and there's a lot of stuff going in there. So I think, to me, the key element is, where do we start to focus so that we keep our attention on what we feel is the main area, and then continue on. Starting point in this project, to me, is the key thing right now.
Well, this plan, they're gonna have phases for us. They're gonna show us,
And that's what I'm saying.
you can do this chunk without doing the rest, kind of thing. And they're
They're
gonna
gonna-
show us that, and then it'll be up to you guys on what we wanna tackle
Yeah,
first.
but that's what I'm saying. We'll get a recommendation from you folks saying, these are the key areas, and this is where you can start here, start there. Okay. Because that, like I say, that's the most important thing.
I have one final question as well. How much is CDOT willing to put into this project for us?
But what's,
Is it a percentage? Is it a,
well, they're paying a 3/4 of this project now,
Okay.
okay?
okay,
When and if the devolution happens of Fremont Drive, CDOT gives us a chunk of money at that time for the devolution of Fremont Drive, and I think there's a formula that's based off of maintenance for the next so many years and that sort of thing. That's how they come up with a price tag for that.
$12.50.
And then from there on out, it's the same as our partnerships are now. It's our same grants that may be available now, that sort of stuff. This will go into, how are we building highway projects now? Are we doing that through grant processes? Are we doing that through regional priority money that we have through CDOT region? Those sorts of things, but there's no commitments now on anybody's part to build
okay.
anything.
So there's no match, there's no.
No. It would depend on the funding mechanism in the future, when and if that's done.
So essentially, it could be paid pretty close to 100%.
Not by
Probably
anybody
not.
else, no. There's always gonna be a match.
Not, we're thinking
No, I
two
mean,
different
yeah.
CDOTs.
Okay. Okay. I was
Grants,
thinking
grant stuff is
with the-
typically 80,
With
20%.
the devolution,
uh,
if that part was.
Well,
brought
the
in.
devolution, let's say it's $500,000. That
Mhm.
would be money that's what the corridor plan contemplates, is we would take that money and put it back into
Yeah.
the construction.
Okay, thank you.
We done with this page?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's all,
Yes,
Yeah.
you could see, we are generally taking, let me go to the next page here. We're generally taking all of the public roads and connecting them to Highway 50. And the ones that are full movement today will remain full movement. The other roads will become right in, right out. The two spots that I told you that we stuck in there from a U-turn standpoint, one is here at Cottonwood. That would be for the westbound traffic to turn left. And then one is at Gradine, so for the eastbound traffic. So those provide left turn movements into those areas, but they also provide the opportunity to make U-turns for vehicles that want to get the other direction on US 50.
And if you don't feel comfortable with the U-turn, it's another 300 to 500 feet to a signal.
You can see that a lot of these businesses that are on Fremont have the ability to get to the local streets. And so in this area, for example, the access to Fremont will be closed, and their access will be gained from Gradine or from Barrett. Let's
I
see,
don't,
is this the Jimmy
I guess I
John's?
just,
think there was a-
I can't see that. How,
Well, it's what's happening today. So they already have, they have access on on the local street and Fremont Drive. And so because they have access on the local road, we can eliminate that access.
that's the dealership, is that not correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, but they don't have access from Barrett, public access,
Well, they have access whether they have cars parked in front of it or not.
do you?
It's based on their use now. Yeah. But they have current drive cuts.
I know somebody that lives on that street, and I think you're right.
Yeah. And even if they didn't have drive cuts, that, again, this is conceptual, that their boundary, their property boundary touches the local road. Could an access be created there? So even if they didn't have one today, conceptually, yes, they could.
You know, a lot of this is gonna come up on the one-to-one.
Absolutely, because,
Where they look at a specific idea for their area,
right, how do
you
they?
know, for their place of business and say,
Yep.
okay, here's the options, guys.
Yeah, what if they have a
Pick one.
drive-through and it's backwards?
Let's work through this and
Yeah.
let's make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So that one-on-one for each and every individual business, will be very important. Because I'm sure you're gonna go in there with a plan for that specific area and say, okay, this is what we're thinking, what are you thinking? Okay, this we can do, this we can't do.
Yep.
Just my thought.
And as we're going through those types of negotiations, for instance, if we take the Ford dealership as an example there, there's a whole lot of space that is going to be created that could be horse traded with.
That's correct.
We do have some locations where we've identified these little connections that you see kind of in the reddish color. These have some options. Basically, this is to get the property that's in the middle, that doesn't have access to the local street system. How do they get to the public street system without creating a lot more access to the highway? And so using that, there's really two options. We can use this frontage road area and basically create them a long driveway that gets them back over to the local street. The other option would be if the property owners are willing to work together and willing to create kind of a shared ability to get to this access point that's already there, then instead of using this space for a big driveway, maybe that space can be used for more parking or whatever the uses that would benefit their business might be. So there's some areas where we have some different options, but there are opportunities to use that frontage road area to either help the system or to help the property owners.
If we did not do the access thing through the back there, at item number 34, isn't that similar to the situation we have today at that Cottonwood intersection?
What is
Or
that?
at least on that one side? Because the other side would be shut off. Is that correct?
Right. And this would be more like a driveway. Right now, you've got a public road with a lot of traffic.
What's the
This-
difference?
The amount of traffic really is what the difference is.
So the
The
only
amount of
thing-
traffic that's accessing at this point, this 34 point, is gonna be much lower for one single business driveway than for,
Okay.
The only
Fremont
people
Drive.
using
that's-
that, going to that property would use that driveway.
I think from an overall standpoint, I think using this access further up on Cottonwood would benefit everybody. Maybe not everybody will see it that way, I don't know. But I see a lot of benefits for both property owners and for the overall system.
The Gradine to Barrett access in purple,
Mhm.
Is that currently private land?
Yes.
Can we make for sure that on all the drawings that we're communicating that that is subject to acquisition of that public or private land?
Yep.
That
Let's say
historic,
mutual acquisition,
something. I don't need
if possible.
in a public hearing,
Because like we said,
somebody,
nobody's taking anything from anybody here.
somebody seeing that road in there and saying, well, they're taking my land. So we need to just clarify on a map that that's subject to whatever.
And we'll go one step further too. We'll go ahead and contact those people. We'll have a discussion with them,
I'd appreciate
so that they
that.
know why it's there.
That would help, Adam.
That would be a huge asset.
Yeah, just making sure they understand it's a dot on the map. It's not
Right,
eminent domain or whatever.
right.
Because that will come up when they look at that map. I guarantee you.
You're being silly.
Sorry. We done with this page?
Yes,
I just got a question on this next page, though.
yes.
Um, It looks to me like you're adding a new signal, but then closing the Abbey bowling alley accesses. Would seem
Right.
like that those would be right-in, right-outs as an option.
So, I guess take a look at this note in here. We've identified this area in between here that we believe a single right-in, right-out could be located. Location to be, and this part of the plan is very dependent on redevelopment, the idea that this area could redevelop in the future. So from that standpoint, we didn't want to define an exact location because we don't know what that land use is going to look like. So basically, we're saying, yes, you'll have one full movement access point with the potential for signalization that's about halfway between each of the existing signals, plus or minus.
But-
And then you'll have one location in between there that a right-in, right-out could go, and we could push it any which way within that area, and then whomever is working a development in this area could determine how that best fits in with their plans.
I guess my suggestion is that instead of blue X's at that Abbey and bowling alley, those should be red asterisks that are proposed conditional right-in, right-out accesses. And then I also have a question as to why we're closing off those accesses further down. That would be in front of that empty lot right now at .62. I think that says 62. Why? Because I have my magnifiers on. Because it would seem like that would be, again, under the current situation. I mean, that signal's probably could be 5, 10 years away.
Right,
That
so
right
remember,
in, right
so
out there.
when this is written, so when these access clauses are written, there's gonna be conditions, triggers. And so, obviously, that one wouldn't go away until that intersection happened.
Right.
So, yeah, but it wouldn't be conditional, it's for sure gonna go away, but not until. And so it'll be written that way in the plan. So number 62 will be closed, when,
When the light goes in.
yeah, that's kind of stuff. And so back to Frank's discussion on phasing and that sort of stuff, this end of actually the two ends of this project are probably the most high-level type look at this and are very dependent on a lot of things falling in place and things that we don't know at this time.
But-
It's more the stuff for sure in between.
Could that number 62 still not be a red asterisk?
Once you do the full movement at number 60,
Right,
It's good.
prior to
you
that.
need to close number 62. It's just too close.
I understand that.
Conditional would be, we have to leave it open unless there's some other thing that can make it work a different way. That's why it's conditional. Where that one, if we have a signal, it doesn't need to be there at all. They don't.
I understand that.
Okay,
But until the signal's there,
right.
that's another one of those dangerous, difficult intersections to come out of that intersection and turn west.
Yeah, or even just going east or west on the frontage road is kind of sketchy depending on if a highway turning movement's happening.
And I guess I would just clarify that until the new access point is there, because the traffic signal is is going to depend on whether or not the traffic signal is warranted. So that process of determining is a signal warranted will still apply to this plan. So basically what this plan says is you can have a full movement intersection at this location. And it has the potential for signalization, but not until it is warranted per MUTCD warrants.
I guess the fundamental problem I have is we're talking about a potential full signal in the future. There's not even any roads there yet.
Right.
Go ahead.
That's why it's a plan. Okay, so I think it's important to note too that a portion of this access control plan is going to be a text portion. So every one of the access points will be defined in text and explained that this is going to remain until such time. So it'll be actually spelled out for them. It's not going to be, just the pictorial.
And back to what Valerie had said earlier about having a plan where developers can see it and everybody's on the same page and has some expectations. That's one of the reasons why we were actually going to stop at Reynolds, but we wanted to extend this project to the Abbey because every time we have a developer come in and look at the Abbey, that's one of their first questions. So what's my access going to look like? Can there be a signal there someday? Now it'll be in the plans with those elements outlined on what and how that may happen.
And it doesn't make sense to move that signal by that Abbey intersection?
No, it's too close to the other signal. So one of the things that we talk about is what we call functional intersection
Right.
area. And it basically is trying to create enough space between the intersection so you can develop your left turn lanes and not have them overlap with one another. And also create enough space where people can make decisions before they get to the next intersection without having things overlap. And then the final piece is how do your signals work together? And if you get those signals too close together, then the ability to go through the corridor without having to stop at every red light starts to diminish, so.
Okay. Council, questions?
One more question, where we're talking about the proposed street. Who owns that land on both sides?
Or which
Or
That's this one here.
is it
So,
city-owned?
on the north
Yeah.
side, the Abbey owns it. There's these two roadways that we show as being public someday, but they are
Okay.
totally dependent on those properties actually redeveloping. Because if they don't redevelop, you have no need for them. But it gives them the opportunity to create a public road intersection with the potential for signalization and then create access into their site. And in basically saying, we would want to have a public road intersection that accesses into this site. On the south side, same thing. If that side doesn't redevelop, you're not going to go in and build some road to nowhere. There's no need for it. So you would still kind of maintain this existing condition. The location of the access to US 50 may shift, but you would hold then that frontage road condition with East Main at that location. And you wouldn't continue a further connection to the south until such time as a developer wanted to do that. And that's what they wanted to do that's what the property owner wanted to do with their land.
And wouldn't that give some flexibility for the developer? I mean, when he comes in to say, hey, this is what we want to do, then everybody get together and say, okay, this is where we can put this now to facilitate your needs? Is that a true statement or not true?
I don't know if it's flexibility. It gives them a plan to work around. This is where the access point's going to be located. You need to plan your access to your site around this location
Okay.
and then create the other elements of your site around that.
Just two things quickly. Again, Adam, I would ask that all of those maps have a notation that's subject to future development and acquiring that private property. And then two, I think it just hit me that, and correct me, that's really the only place between Reynolds and Steinmeier where you could actually have a signal. Is that correct?
Yes,
I mean, that if we're gonna have a signal in that area, it's gotta be in that spot
that's correct.
to meet all the parameters. Okay.
So
John?
I believe what we're being asked is to approve the first draft to the public today. And so my question is kind of timing. do you intend to, does the city intend to try to get with all the private property owners before that date? How long is it gonna take to get all the private, to talk to them all? Is it appropriate to have that, first draft before we talk to the private property owners?
I think,
It's appropriate to have a first draft. You need to have something to talk from and to give them a sense of what you're trying to accomplish. And then, their input can be taken into account and, things can shift and move as necessary, or if it doesn't work out that things can shift and move, we can have a discussion about why that doesn't work. But if you don't have something to talk from, you kind of can't go anywhere.
I think we could probably overcome one of the concerns by saying, when it's put out to the public, proposed subject to public opinion, right on the top of this, so that people know that, hey, this isn't a final draft, we're waiting for y'all to talk to us, just proposed plan subject to public opinion, which I think would be very monumental in dodging a lot of bullets, which is what we're trying to do right here.
Yeah, and absolutely. We call this a draft. We go into it calling it a draft.
Sometimes we have to put it in plain language.
Instead of opinion, put public input.
Public input.
Input, yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think anything that comes out with this while it's in the planning stages, needs to contain that text, because then it's right there. And like I said, there's a lot of bullets thrown out there because people look at it and they haven't attended some of the meetings and stuff, and they're just looking at a piece of paper and it says, oh, this is the plan. Pending subject, or public input. I think that would just alleviate a lot of the issues that we've run into in the past.
Well, and I would also suggest that each one of these commercial business entities that's affected by this should preemptively get a enlarged version showing the entry and exit points that are proposed, because.
I think they'll have that when they visit with them one-on-one.
Well, I think they will, but I think that some of the backlash that we got from the corridor along the river was it was released to the public, and these people are like, hey, that's my house, and this is being planned around. I think that they would just like the forewarning of the preemptive notification.
I want to close with my final thing. I want everybody to realize, a lot of people in the past say we have problems with CDOT and everybody else. And I appreciate the help that CDOT is doing, working with us on this plan.
Absolutely.
We don't know how much they're going to participate dollar-wise, but at least they're at the table with us, and they're willing to be at the table with us when we talk to the property owners for developments. And that, to me, is a big, big start. Kudos to you guys.
Well,
Makes it a team.
Yes,
and
thank you,
representatives
Michelle.
of CDOT, please don't take any of my questions as being naysayer or negative to this. I'm just trying to think of the things that are going to be presented to us, so I have an answer to them. So I think you're absolutely right that this Highway 50 corridor needs addressed. And, a lot of the foundational concept of what you have here is good concept. I think it's just the fine tuning, and I think a lot of it is the communication is paramount. And that's why I suggest everybody who's going to be impacted preemptively get some sort of notification, just because it's not that it makes a difference. It's not that it's going to change their input. It's just people like to have an idea of what's going on with their property before
Common
the public
courtesy, I
does.
think, is the word.
Yeah, it's.
I think, I would like to commend you on taking into account our business owners, our local business owners. And being a business owner myself, I think it's very important to make access to each of these businesses accessible. And I think that you're really putting that in the forefront. So I appreciate that.
maybe just for information for some of the new council, and Tony may have to help me and Adam, but essentially sometime back, the city entered into agreement with Stolfus, is that how you say that? To essentially do this project schedule. So the agreement is already in process. And in part of that agreement, there's this project schedule that is essentially here. And this process is, I'd say it's already in process, but the whole plan is in process.
Keeping it moving.
And we're at that point there where it says you are here, or we are there, or something. But, I mean, that's kind of where we're at, so.
Most of you are.
Some of us.
And I think the way
Don't
that,
rub it in.
that Adam and Valerie have set this up is that they've set up several opportunities for the public to have input. To do an access control plan by law, you're required to do one public open house, and you are required to notify every single adjacent property owner to the highway within your project limits. They're going one step beyond, in fact, a couple of steps beyond, by incorporating the one-on-one meetings and also incorporating a second public open house, which is really nice because it lets people then see how did some of the comments get incorporated, and we'll highlight those. Hey, this changed here. Probably not everybody, we're not going to probably be able to accommodate every single comment
Right.
that we get. But we'll work towards informed consent so that they understand why we're making the decisions we're making, and help also you understand why those decisions have been made. So there's a lot of good opportunity for public involvement in these plans. I've done several of them throughout the state. The public involvement is key to making the best plan because you guys live here. And you're using these facilities every day. So there's things that we don't always see, and we're like, oh, we didn't realize that. And you can adjust and make a better plan, so.
So the point is, maybe in terms of answering your question, we don't really need to take any action other than the fact that we've reviewed the information, given them our input. They're going to take our input and modify and move forward. So it's not that we need to approve or disapprove at this point,
The ball just keeps rolling.
other than
Okay.
whatever comments we've given them. And regard to the property owners, that kind of came about as discussion between staff and council with previous projects for us to try to put our best foot forward and reach out to each one of those people to make for sure that we're proactively communicating with them. And staff are doing a good job of that in terms of that's what we want to do. And I think staff are doing that.
I think that I wanted to say that we are requesting your support in moving this forward, because you guys are the ones that are going to be approached by the town folk who are going to be contacting you and say, what's this about? What did we hear? And if you believe in this and support the effort that we're going through, then I think you can put a positive spin on it, and then maybe they won't. It'll allay some of their fears. So that's personally what I would love to see, is that you support our effort in this and join us in it.
So can we do an official thumbs up thing, unofficial?
Absolutely. You bet.
Make a note.
Nothing else?
And thank you,
Oh.
Valerie, and for being here. Thank you, and Adam and Michelle. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Weren't here in order to do the interviews for the replacement for Mr. Gill's position. We're going to need to just call a special meeting for April 12th at 3:30. And then I'll go ahead and move forward with advertising that position. So I'll put everybody that's here that will be the ones that call that special meeting. We can't do a motion
And
here.
that'll give us 13 days of advertising.
Do I get a vote?
There is
no.
no vote here.
There is no vote
Fine.
for you.
I just
Anything
wanna
else?
do a thumbs up.
Thank you. Appreciate your help.